Welcome to the Flag Bearer channel. This is Little Known Black History Facts. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The murder of Frazier Baker. He took the job, and it cost him his life. After the 1896 presidential election, the Republican President William McKinley administration appointed hundreds of black people to postmasterships across the southern United States during his remaining tenure as part of patronage jobs to build local networks. These recess appointments were resisted by local whites who resented any black Republican office holders, and especially appointments made by an outgoing administration. They feared that the increased political power of black postmasters would embolden them to proposition white women. Frazier Baker, a family man and a teacher, was targeted for lynching when the McKinley administration named him postmaster of the majority white community of Lake City, South Carolina in 1897. Baker and his wife Lavinia were born in Effingham, South Carolina, a mostly black area where he had previously served as postmaster. To assume his latest federal assignment, Baker and his family had to relocate to Lake City, a predominantly white community. Baker immediately encountered fierce opposition from local white conservative Democrats. While the surrounding Williamsburg County was 63% black, Lake City was overwhelmingly white, with fewer than a dozen black residents. Whites initiated a boycott of the Lake City post office and circulated petitions calling for Baker's dismissal. From the outset, Baker faced bitter opposition from Lake City whites. Residents filed several grievances against Baker, sharply criticizing his administrative abilities and accusing him of being incompetent, ill-mannered, and lazy. Among their complaints was that Baker had reduced mail deliveries from 3 times to once a day. Baker, however, had curtailed deliveries to daily drops due to repeated threats on his life. Federal postal inspectors investigated the claims and determined that the accusations against Baker were unsubstantiated. Baker also faced regular violence. In one instance, Baker and an acquaintance faced gunfire as they left the post office. Another time, the post office building was shot up, and about 6 months after Baker took the job, the post office was set afire and burned down. At the recommendation of authorities, the post office was relocated to the outskirts of Lake City in the hope of reducing racial hostility. Even on the edges of town, however, racial violence dogged Baker and his family. Whites, who were angered by the elevation of a black person, petitioned the government for his removal, tried to assassinate him, and eventually burned the Lake City post office to the ground. Refusing to give up the job, Baker moved the post office into his home. During the early morning hours of February 22, 1898, a mob set fire to the Baker home and fired a hail of bullets as the family tried to flee. The mob set the house on fire to force the family out. The Baker family awoke to find their house, which also served as the post office, on fire. Lavinia, Baker's wife, quickly alerted Baker, who immediately tried to extinguish the fire. Lavinia then grabbed their youngest child, 2-year-old Julia, into her arms and gathered up the other 5 children. Frazier Baker attempted to put out the fire without success and sent his son Lincoln to find help. As soon as Lincoln opened the door, he was met with gunfire, and Baker pulled him back into the house. Baker cursed the mob and began to pray. As the fire grew, the heat intensified, and Baker turned to his wife Lavinia, saying they might as well die running as well as standing still, and they started for the door. Desperate to shepherd his family away from the danger, Baker opened the front door, but gunshots struck him in the head and body, killing him as he fell backward into the blazing building. Lavinia was also shot as she fled. She was struck in the forearm, which caused her to drop Julia. The bullet that had hit Lavinia also fatally shot Julia. Both Baker and his baby daughter Julia lay dead on the floor while flames consumed their bodies. The gunfire continued, injuring the three oldest children, but they somehow managed to escape through an open back door and into the night. Lavinia, his wife, and two of his other 5 children were wounded, but escaped the burning house and mob. Lavinia and her surviving children escaped to a neighbor's house. There she saw the critical gunshot wounds of 3 of her children. Remarkably, 2 of her children were physically unharmed. Wounded by the same bullet that had killed her daughter, Lavinia rallied her family to escape the burning house, and they ran across the road to hide under shrubbery in an adjacent field. After waiting for the flames and the gunfire to subside, Lavinia made her way to a neighbor's house, where she found one daughter waiting. They were later joined by the oldest, Rosa. Rosa had been shot through the right arm and fled the house as an unidentified white male pursued her. Only Sarah, age 7, and Millie, age 5, escaped unscathed. The survivors remained in Lake City for 3 days, but received no medical treatment. In April 1899, 13 white men were put on trial for conspiring against Baker. Although 13 white men were tried for the lynching of the Bakers, no one was convicted. After 22 hours of deliberation, an irreconcilably divided jury produced a mistrial. Evidence suggested approximately half of the jurors had voted to convict the white men for the lynching of the Bakers. Ida B. Wells Barnett, who was an advocate against lynching, met with President McKinley, stating that this was a federal issue since Frazier Baker was working as a postmaster for the federal government. McKinley assured her that there would be a federal investigation. However, the federal government never took over prosecution of the case. The all-white jury failed to convict the perpetrators. Following the trial, Lavinia moved her family to Boston, Massachusetts. Unfortunately, when a tuberculosis outbreak ravaged through a poor black community in Boston, Lavinia's youngest child, William, died from the illness in 1908. 12 years later, she lost 3 more children. Finally, in 1942, Lavinia's last surviving child died from a heart attack. Afterward, Lavinia returned to South Carolina, where she resided until her death in 1947. Frazier Baker had taken a job as a postmaster in a white man's town, which automatically put a target on his back. In January of 2019, in Lake City, the very same city that took his life, a post office was named in his memory. Until next time, if you like little-known history facts as I do, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Press the bell to be notified of future uploads. Thank you for watching.